It was a Saturday morning in November, the kind that comes into a Georgia kitchen sideways through the blinds and makes everything look like it's underwater. Leonard was in my kitchen. He'd come over at 7:30 to help me fix the back door frame. It had been swelling in the humidity for 2 weeks, and I'd mentioned it in passing, and Leonard had shown up with his truck and his tools the way he always did, before being asked, moving through my house with the ease of someone who considers the place familiar. He was a good man to have around for that kind of thing. I had told myself that many times. I was at the coffee pot. Leonard was outside on the porch, measuring the door frame. His phone rang. He answered it. I heard his voice come in through the screen. "Hey, Joanna." I did not move. "No, he's resting. He's been tired lately." A pause. He said so himself. "He's not really up for company right now, that's all." I was holding a coffee mug. It was the blue one Vivian bought at a pottery fair in 1998 that I have never once used for anything except coffee. My hands were perfectly still. "I know you want to visit, Joanna, I know. But right now isn't a good time." He gets overwhelmed. "He asked me to tell you." A pause. Then, "Call again in the spring, maybe." I set the mug down on the counter beside Vivian's jewelry box. I had not asked Leonard to say any of that. I had not told him I was overwhelmed. I had not asked him to speak to my daughter about when she was and was not welcome in her father's life. I was not tired. I had been up since 5:30. Leonard came back inside, set his phone in his shirt pocket, and said, "Got the measurements. I'll need to pick up some materials. Mind if I run to Home Depot and come back this afternoon?" "That's fine," I said. He left. I picked up the coffee mug. I took one sip. I set it back down. Then I walked through the kitchen and out to the workshop. I needed to think, and I've always thought best with something in my hands. My name is Earl Dawson. I'm 67 years old, and I live in LaGrange, Georgia, in a house I built with my brother Roy the summer I was 31. Roy is gone now, heart attack, 2016, the year my younger daughter Joanna turned 35, which is a detail I always remember because Joanna gave the eulogy, and it was the most honest thing I've heard said at a funeral. Roy would have agreed with every word. I taught English at Troup County High School for 32 years. I coached baseball for 31 of those years. 4 of my players went on to professional ball. I am not particularly impressed by that number. I am more proud of the 100 or so who called me when they needed a recommendation letter, or brought their kids to meet me, or showed up to my retirement party and filled the school gymnasium with people I hadn't expected to see. That meant something. Vivian was a librarian. We met at a county fair when I was 26 and she was 24, and she married me despite the fact that I had 2 left feet, a workshop in the garage, and opinions about baseball that she found exhausting. We had 37 years together. Patricia came first, then Joanna, and then it was the 4 of us in that house on Magnolia Street until the girls went to college, and then it was the 2 of us, which was different but not worse. Vivian died 7 years ago, pancreatic cancer. The speed of it was a kind of mercy and a kind of theft at the same time, and I have never found a way to say which it felt like more. I paid off the house in 2009. I drove home from the bank and walked directly to the workshop and sat on the stool near the workbench for about an hour. The coffee can full of nails was right there where it always was, label worn completely off, the way it has been since 1987. I don't know what I was thinking about in that hour. I know I was not unhappy. The house on Magnolia Street is mine. The workshop is mine. The lake house on Lake Harding, Vivian's mother's family property, passed down 2 generations to Vivian and passed at her death to me with the understanding it would go eventually to both daughters equally. That is mine in the sense that I am the steward of it, not the owner of it. I have understood that from the beginning. On the kitchen counter, between the coffee pot and the window, there is a small wooden jewelry box I made for Vivian on our 25th anniversary. Cherry wood. I carved her initials and the year on the bottom, VD 1994. She kept her rings in it. After she died, I kept it in the same place she always kept it, and I put her wedding ring inside. That's what I had on the Saturday morning. Leonard stood in my kitchen and told my younger daughter to call again in the spring, maybe. I want to tell you how Leonard came into our family, because I want you to understand that I am not a man who misses things easily, and I missed this for a long time. Patricia met Leonard 8 years ago. He was a contractor remodeling work, some new construction, decent reputation in the county. He was easy to be around. He knew how to listen. He knew how to be helpful without making the help feel like a debt. In the first 2 years, I liked him genuinely. He was interested in the workshop, in what I built. He'd come over on a Saturday and help me with a project and not need the conversation to go anywhere in particular. I thought, Patricia did well. The first thing I noticed, and I want to be clear that I noticed it and chose to interpret it charitably, was the way Leonard sometimes answered questions I had asked Patricia. Not aggressively, just as a habit. I would ask Patricia how things were going at the clinic where she worked, and Leonard would answer before she had a chance to. I told myself it was an eagerness to be included. I had seen that in young men who want to belong somewhere. The second thing I noticed was that Joanna started calling less. Joanna had always been the daughter who called every Sunday. Then it was every 2 weeks. Then once a month. When I asked her about it on one of the calls we did have, she said she'd been busy work, her apartment, a new relationship that hadn't worked out. I believed her. People get busy. The third thing I noticed was a comment Leonard made at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. Joanna hadn't come. She was in Boston for a work conference, which he had told me about and I had thought was completely reasonable. Leonard said, at the table, while passing the green beans. It's a shame Joanna couldn't prioritize being here. She knows how important the holidays are to you, Earl. I looked at him. She has work, I said. Of course, Leonard said. I just think about how you must feel. I thought about that sentence for a long time afterward. The specific thing that bothered me about it was not what he said it was, that he had decided, on my behalf, how I must feel. Without asking, but I let it go. He was making conversation. He was, I thought, trying to express concern. Then came the Saturday in October when Frank Simmons said something at the Waffle House that changed everything. Frank Simmons is 69 and the best first base coach I ever worked with, and he's been one of my oldest friends since we both started at Troup County the same fall. 1,985. He drives a 12-year-old Ford pickup that he maintains himself and is inexplicably proud of. We have Saturday coffee at the Waffle House on Veterans Parkway most weeks, unless one of us has something going on. He said, while his eggs were being refilled, looking at his plate and not at me. Joanna seemed good when I saw her last month. At Barbara's church thing. When was that? I said. 3, 4 weeks ago. She asked about you. He looked up. She seemed a little worried about you, actually. Said she hadn't been able to get through much lately. I said, I've been right here. Frank set his fork down. He has the quality of a man who knows when to stop talking and wait. I said, how worried did she seem? Enough to bring it up to a woman she barely knows, Frank said. That's how worried. We drank our coffee. I did not say anything else about it. But on the drive home, I counted backward. The last time I had actually spoken to Joanna on the phone, not texted, spoken was 6 weeks ago, and I had called her. Before that, it had been 2 months. I had assumed she was busy. I had assumed the texts I didn't get back were just her being caught up in things. Had I sent texts she hadn't answered, or had she sent texts I hadn't received? I got home and I went to the drawer in the kitchen where I keep the old family tablet, a big screen thing Leonard had set up for me 2 years ago so I could read news without squinting. I had stopped using it much because my phone was easier. I turned it on. There were 14 text messages from Joanna's number in the last 4 months. On the tablet's messaging app, which had been connected to my account without my quite understanding how. I had not seen a single one on my phone. I read all 14. The last one, from 3 weeks ago, said, Dad, I know you might be going through something and I don't want to push, but I miss you. Just let me know you're okay. I sat at the kitchen table for a while. The jewelry box was on the counter. Vivian's ring was inside it. Then came November. Then came the Saturday morning Leonard was in my kitchen fixing the door frame. Then came, call again in the spring, maybe. And then I knew. In the workshop, there is a stool near the workbench and a coffee can with the label worn off, and no particular reason to keep going back to it except that it is where I have always thought best, and I needed to think. I sat there for a while without touching anything. The workshop smells like sawdust and linseed oil, and there is a radio on the shelf that gets one station clearly, and it was playing something country and old that I did not pay attention to. What I was thinking about was this. I had a son-in-law who had been standing in my house for 4 years, fixing my things and going fishing and making himself indispensable, while quietly and systematically making sure my younger daughter believed her father didn't want to see her. And while making sure I believed my younger daughter had grown distant, he had not stolen money, he had not forged documents, he had stolen time. He had stolen 4 years of Sunday phone calls and holiday visits and the ordinary accumulation of a father-daughter relationship, and he had done it so gradually that neither Joanna nor I had noticed until the damage was nearly finished. I thought about what to do. I am not an impulsive man. I have coached enough baseball to know that the worst decisions are the ones made in the inning right after the other team scores. You wait, you breathe, you look at what you actually have to work with. What I had was a phone. What I had was Joanna's number. I called her. She picked up on the second ring, and when she heard my voice, she said, "Dad," in a way that had enough in it that I had to look at the coffee can for a moment before I could say anything back. "I got your texts," I said. "All of them. I'm sorry it took me this long to call." There was a pause. Then she said, "Are you okay?" "I'm okay," I said. "But I have some things I need to understand, and I'm going to need you to tell me what you've been hearing, because some of it might not be true." We talked for an hour and 40 minutes. Joanna told me everything she had been told, that I was having cognitive difficulties, that I had asked Leonard to manage my communications because I got overwhelmed, that I had said specifically I wasn't ready for visitors from Atlanta. She had believed enough of it to pull back because she'd been afraid of pushing me when I wasn't well. None of it was true. Not one word of it. By the time we hung up, Joanna was crying. She told me she had missed me. She told me she had driven to LaGrange twice and been met at the door by Leonard, who told her I was resting. I sat in the workshop after we hung up and I looked at the coffee can. Then I picked up a piece of cherry wood I had been saving and I started working. I made a small box. Nothing fancy, just a rectangular box with a fitted lid, dovetail joints, sanded smooth. Cherry wood, because that's what I had. It took most of a week, working in the evenings after dinner. I have always made things when I need to process something. Vivian used to say I couldn't think in a chair, I had to think in my hands. She was right. There's something about repetitive physical work that lets the emotional work run in parallel, underneath, until it's done. By the time I finished the box, I knew what I was going to do. I was not going to confront Leonard in his truck. I was not going to call Patricia and make accusations before she had seen anything for herself. I was not going to write a letter or involve a lawyer or make the situation into a legal problem when it was, at its heart, a family problem. I was going to have people over for dinner. That's all. I called Patricia on a Wednesday and said I wanted to do a family dinner on Saturday. She said that sounded nice. She said she'd bring her corn casserole. Then I called Joanna and said I wanted to do a family dinner on Saturday. She said she'd be there. Neither of them knew about the other call. Leonard, of course, assumed he was coming too. He was Patricia's husband. He was always included. That was the arrangement that had been in place for 4 years. I did not call Leonard to uninvite him. That would have raised questions. Joanna arrived at 5:30. I had told her to come at 5:30. She parked on the street and came up the walk, and I opened the door before she could knock, and we stood there on the porch for a moment looking at each other. She is 41 years old. She has Vivian's eyes. I had not seen her in person since the previous Christmas, and before that, it had been longer than it should have been. She said, "Hi, Daddy." I said, "Come in." We sat in the kitchen and talked for 45 minutes before Patricia and Leonard arrived. I made her coffee. She told me about her work, her apartment, the dog she had gotten last spring that she had been wanting to tell me about for months. I told her about the baseball team I'd been helping coach on Saturdays at the middle school. Voluntary, nothing official, just old habit. We talked the way people talk when they have been waiting to talk for a long time. At 6:15, Patricia's car pulled into the driveway. Joanna and I were sitting at the kitchen table when they came in. Patricia walked in first, carrying the corn casserole, and saw Joanna, and the expression that crossed her face was complicated, surprised, and then glad, and then something else that moved across it too fast for me to name. "Joanna," she said, "I didn't know you'd be here." "Dad invited me," Joanna said. Leonard came in behind Patricia. He was carrying a bottle of wine he had brought without being asked. He saw Joanna and his face did what faces do when a person realizes a situation is not what they thought it was. His jaw was set the way it sets when he is recalibrating. "Joanna," he said, "good to see you." "Leonard," she said. I said, "Sit down, everyone. Dinner's in 15 minutes. We had dinner. I had made pot roast Vivian's recipe, the one that takes 4 hours and is worth all 4 of them. Patricia brought the casserole. Leonard opened the wine. We ate. For most of dinner, Leonard managed the conversation the way he always managed things. Smoothly, competently, with the ease of a man who is used to being the one who arranges what happens next. He asked Patricia about her week. He asked me about the baseball kids. He said something funny about a job site he was working on that made Patricia laugh. He did not speak to Joanna directly for the first 40 minutes. I waited. When Joanna mentioned that she'd been trying to visit more regularly, Leonard said, "Earl, you should have told us you were ready for more company. We didn't want to overwhelm you." I looked at him. I set my fork down. I've been ready for company, I said. I've been right here. Leonard said, you know what I mean. The difficult stretch. I don't know what you mean, I said. There wasn't a difficult stretch. The table was quiet. Patricia looked at me, then at Leonard. Leonard told me you asked him to manage your calls for a while, Patricia said carefully. Because you were overwhelmed. I never asked that, I said. She looked at Leonard. Leonard said, Earl, I was just trying to help. You seemed tired. I was protecting your peace. Protecting my peace, I said. Yes. By telling my daughter to call again in the spring, the specific words hung in the room. Joanna had gone very still. Patricia had set her fork down. I heard you on the phone, I said, in my kitchen. On a Saturday morning, you told Joanna I was overwhelmed and asked to have my calls managed. I never said that. I've never said anything like that. And I'd like to know how long it's been going on. Leonard looked at me. He was calculating. I had watched young men calculate on the diamond for 31 years, and I knew the look. He said, I was trying to look out for you, Earl. Patricia and I both were. Patricia didn't know what you were doing, I said. It was not a question. I looked at Patricia when I said it. Patricia looked at Leonard. For a moment, nobody said anything. Then Patricia said, in a voice I recognized from when she was 9 years old and had broken something in the house and was deciding whether to tell me, Leonard, tell me exactly what you said to her. Leonard said, Patty, tell me. He told her. He softened some of it. He called it boundary management. He called it protecting the family structure. But Joanna was at the same table, and Joanna told the parts Leonard left out, quietly, looking at the tablecloth, and Patricia listened to all of it. I did not say anything for a long time. I let the conversation run. I had said what needed to be said. When it had run as far as it could go, I got up from the table. I went to the kitchen counter. I picked up Vivian's jewelry box. I brought it back to the table and set it in front of Joanna. I said, your mother wanted you to have this. I should have given it to you a long time ago. Joanna looked at the box. She looked at me. She did not open it right away. Patricia was looking at the tablecloth. Leonard was looking at the wall. I want to stop here, because this story is not really about Leonard, or not only about Leonard. This story is about the kind of thing that can happen so gradually that you don't see it until a friend mentions something at breakfast and you count backward and realize it's been 6 weeks since you actually spoke to someone you love. There are people in every family who manage the relationships around them. Some of them do it consciously. Some of them do it because management is how they know to love, because they grew up in houses where stability was scarce and they learned very early to control what they could reach. I have tried to understand Leonard in those terms, and I have not entirely failed. But I want to say something about what he took that cannot be given back. 4 years of Sunday phone calls. 2 holiday visits Joanna drove in for and was turned away from. 14 texts she sent that I never received. A dog she got last spring that I'm only now hearing about. You can give someone a box. You can fix a door frame. You cannot give back 4 years. And here's where I have to be honest about something I did wrong. I noticed the signals. I noticed the way Leonard answered for Patricia. I noticed when Joanna stopped calling as often. I told myself it was natural. I told myself not to be the kind of father who sees problems where there are none. I gave him the benefit of the doubt for too long. I am not sure what the right amount was. I don't think there's a formula for how long you wait before you decide that your instinct was right. I think about Vivian. She read people faster than I did. She would have seen it sooner. She had a way of naming things calmly, without accusation, that was harder to deny than any argument. I never had that gift. I learned to wait. Sometimes waiting is wisdom, and sometimes it's just waiting. I'm not sure which this was. Patricia called me 3 days after the dinner. Leonard had told her the full account of what he'd been doing, with more honesty than he'd shown at the table, possibly because she had asked with more insistence than I had. She said, I didn't know about most of it, Daddy. I said, I know you didn't. She said, I knew he was worried about the future, the house, things. I know, I said. I should have asked you directly. You should have, I said, but you didn't know you needed to. This is the part of the story that doesn't resolve cleanly, and I want to be honest about that. Patricia and Leonard are still married. I don't know the current state of that marriage, and it isn't my place to manage it, which is a lesson I arrived at partly by watching what managing looks like when it goes wrong. They have had hard conversations I haven't been part of. Leonard has not been to the house on Magnolia Street since November. I don't know if he will come back. I have not closed that door, but I have not opened it either, which is about where I am. Patricia comes over on her own sometimes now. We eat dinner and she tells me about things and I tell her about the baseball kids. Our relationship is something I am rebuilding carefully, the way you rebuild a door frame with patience and with attention to what was actually wrong. Joanna has been to LaGrange 3 times since November. She brings the dog a 3-year-old beagle named Howard, who is extremely confident for his size and has a fondness for my workshop. He knocked over the coffee can the second time he visited, sending about 800 nails across the floor, and we spent 20 minutes picking them up and talking while we did it. It was one of the better 20 minutes I've had in a long time. The lake house on Lake Harding is in both daughters' names. I had that changed in January. It was what Vivian intended and what I intended, and the paperwork that stood in the way of it was cleared up in an afternoon. I don't know why I waited as long as I did. I think I assume these things have a way of working out. They do not always work out on their own. Some things you have to go fix. Last month, Joanna called me on a Sunday afternoon and asked what I was working on in the workshop. I told her I was making a small bench for the back porch, nothing complicated, just something to sit on in the evenings. She asked if she could come watch. I said she could come watch and she could bring Howard and we'd make a day of it. She came the following Saturday. She sat on a stool near the workbench and asked questions about the wood and the tools, the way her mother used to ask questions about things she didn't quite understand but wanted to understand anyway. Howard slept near the door. At some point, Joanna picked up the old coffee can and turned it in her hands. "What was on the label?" she said. "I don't remember," I said. She put it back. We kept working. "I want to tell you about the jewelry box." Joanna didn't open it at the dinner table. She took it home that night and called me when she got back to Atlanta. It was almost 11 o'clock. She said, "Daddy?" I said, "I know. She would have given this to me herself," Joanna said. "I know she would have," I said. "I held on to it too long. That's on me." There was a pause. Then she said, "What's inside it?" "Her wedding ring," I said. Another pause. "Are you sure?" she said. "Yes," I said. "She would have wanted you to have both." We talked for another 20 minutes about nothing in particular. About the dog, about the weather in Atlanta, about a restaurant she'd been to that she thought I might like. Before she hung up, she said, "I'll see you soon." "You will," I said. I hung up and sat in the living room in the dark for a while. The counter where the jewelry box used to sit was empty. I looked at it, then I went to the workshop and sat on the stool and thought about what I wanted to make next. Here is the thing I come back to. I did not catch Leonard doing something dramatic. He didn't steal money. He didn't forge signatures. What he did was quieter and, in some ways, harder to name. He positioned himself as the person who managed access to me, and he did it carefully enough that no single conversation was a smoking gun. It was a pattern, and patterns are slow to see. I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it before you answer. Is there someone in your life who has been deciding, on your behalf, who you are allowed to be close to? Not dramatically, not obviously, but gradually, through small acts of management that each look like consideration? I'm not trying to create suspicion where there is none. Most of the people who manage the relationships around them are doing it out of fear, not malice. They are afraid of losing something. They handle it the wrong way. That doesn't make it acceptable. I'm also asking you to consider whether you have ever been on the other side of this. Whether there is someone you have been keeping your distance from because of something you were told, rather than something you experienced. Whether the distance you're calling their choice was in fact your own. I don't have an easy resolution to offer. Patricia and I are okay. Joanna and I are better than we've been in years. Leonard and I are somewhere I don't have a word for yet. And 4 years of the ordinary accumulation of a relationship are gone, and that's just the shape of things now. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment and tell me honestly. Would you have waited for a dinner? Or would you have confronted Leonard the morning you heard him on the phone? Tell me. Both answers are reasonable. I'm genuinely not sure I made the right choice. If you know a parent who is being kept at arm's length from a child they love, send this to them. Not as advice. Just so they know it's possible to find out. It's possible to call. Some things you have to go fix. And the first step is picking up the phone.